Hello everybody, welcome to Adobe Live. My name is Flynn and we would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we are creating and streaming from today and pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. My name is Flynn Tracy, I'm the host today and I'm hanging out with my good buddy, fantastic illustrator and artist Jeremy Lord. Hello Jeremy.
Oh.
Hello in there. We're kicking off illustration, so we're very excited to be kicking off our month of illustration. We just focused on motion last month, so we have a lot of great streams you can go back and check out if motion is your thing. Lots of Premiere Pro. There's all this Premiere Pro amazing stuff that's come out. We did some tips and tricks and some intro videos for that as well, and we did graphic design the month before, so there's heaps of stuff. But hey, we're very excited to be here with illustration. We're kicking off Let's Get Started. So this is our Let's Get Started series. So if you're new to drawing, if you're new to maybe drawing in Photoshop, if you have questions about your process and things like that, we've got the expert with us now. He doesn't like me calling him an expert, but that's why I say it. Jeremy Lord. So yeah, we are live. If you're watching over on YouTube, jump over to behance.net/live and you can ask us questions as we're going along. Jeremy's very good at diverting and jumping off and saying, hey, I'll explain that little thing to you as well. So while we've got him, let's use him. But Jeremy, for those that aren't familiar with you, first of all, how are you? And second of all, can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
So thanks, and hi everybody, thanks for joining us. So I am Jeremy, as Flynn has said. I am a freelance illustrator and I do lots of kind of like cyberpunk, Japanese manga, neon-y, and like anime illustrations. So I thought we were going to kind of do something like this today. But it is May the 4th tomorrow.
Yes.
And as a good kind of Star Wars fan, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to draw a little kind of like droid robot. But yeah, today we're going to look at kind of doing things a little bit differently. We're going to look at inspiration, reference. We're going to start the drawing, kind of like the basics of how to start an illustration. And then we're going to hopefully kind of push that illustration into, refined sketch, inking, and then color potentially on the on episode 2 on Thursday. So yeah, should be fun.
That's super cool. So yeah, and hello to everyone in chat. Hi, Annika. Lovely to see you. Hey, Gareth, what's up? So if you have any questions during the process, feel free to throw them in chat. Also, just say hi. It's always great to hear where you're from, what you're up to. It's Tuesday here in Sydney, Australia. We're both in Sydney. But we might jump over to it because there's always so much good content with Jeremy. So I don't want to take up any more time. So should we jump over to Photoshop, check out this blank canvas? Where do we start? Let's roll.
All right. So yeah, so we're in Photoshop. As always, this is my graceland. I like Photoshop just mostly because it's the most akin to kind of like actual drawing of all the Adobe programs. So I predominantly use Photoshop. So we got this big blank canvas, nothing fancy here, literally just like an A4, 300 DPI. This is really, it's a little bit bigger than A4 actually, but that's all right. So yeah, just blank canvas, and we're kind of sitting in front of this, and a lot of artists are going to look at this, any creatives actually, will look at a kind of a quote unquote blank canvas and maybe kind of get frozen. So I thought I'd start at the start, which is like, what's the genesis for you even kind of starting a new piece of art? How do you like open up the canvas and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
And where does everything begin? So I've got this that I kind of prepped for you guys. So I'm going to do a little kind of like droid robot thing. How much kind of Star Wars is in there is a big question mark. We'll kind of see how that goes. I don't want to kind of limit myself too much at this stage. I do have a little R2 unit down here that you can see, but the rest is not like super Star Wars-y. It's just like Star Wars, lots of robots, lots of droids. I like doing kind of like Mecha Soul stuff. It's super fun to do. So we've got a bunch of kind of reference and inspiration here from other artists. So none of this stuff is mine. But yeah, you go online and you kind of find these things. But I just wanted to touch upon the difference in between inspiration and reference. So usually in the process, inspiration is the thing that comes first, right? Like you have an idea, you're inspired by something, you make a decision to like do a thing in a certain way. It might be blurry in your mind at this stage, but it's still like something has triggered something in your brain, and it's given you this idea of like, I'm going to do this. Reference, on the other hand, is once you've got the inspiration, you might not necessarily know how the thing looks or what are some of the things that I can do here. And so that's going to be used kind of throughout. Now, the two can kind of cross over, and we'll see this as I start kind of making this. Inspiration can be used as reference, and reference can be used as inspiration. But generally speaking, that distinction is like inspiration comes first, then you go and find a whole bunch of reference to see how stuff looks. So in the real world, that basically means like, hey, I want to draw like a person surfing. I have no idea how that looks. And me gets a whole bunch of like surf illustration inspirations. And then I'll get some reference on like, how does a hand look, or how does an arm kind of hold when you're like mid surf, or like, what's the pose look like? So I think that's going to be always like super interesting to do and really important as well. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on too.
Yeah, I'm not meaning to interrupt you, but it reminds me a lot about trying to draw a bike from memory, and illustrators probably have a better job at this. But I remember it's like, it's like a corporate quick little exercise, like, hey, just draw a bike real quick, and you've got 1 minute, and everyone goes, oh, okay. And your bike just would never work. Like the vast majority of the bikes just would never work, because you know what a bike looks like, but actually drawing it and showing it to someone, you show them and you're like, that's a weird bike, dude. Like, do you not know what a bike looks like? It's like, well, you draw a bike.
It's this, right? Like you draw this. It's like, here's my bike.
That's my bike.
Yeah. It's like,
that bike
that's
doesn't
not how that
work.
works.
Yeah. That's a crazy Dutch bike. So yeah, it is very interesting. So it's like, drawing from memory, like having the references there, and things like that. That's a really great like comparison between the two. I really like that. It's almost like a Venn diagram as well, which is cool how they cross over.
I think the thing before we start getting into this, and we don't want to spend too much time on this, because we'll keep like jumping back to this as we're drawing, and it's always fun to just get straight into it. But for me, it's like we always talk about like visual language, right? And this kind of stuff, like all the things that you see here that I've kind of collected as reference, it's like, hey, cool, like this kind of drum thing looks like this, and it's got these little like ventilation holes, or like do not step here, or like we don't really know what these things do, because obviously they're not real. Like we can't see like, oh, that's a screw and that's a clip or whatever. It's just like, it looks like it does a thing. It looks like it performs a function, which is key. But we're not necessarily sure on exactly what it is. But what these things are exactly like a language. They're words that you need to learn. And the more you draw them, the more that word sticks in your brain. And the more next time you do something like this, you won't necessarily need the reference because that word is now in your brain. But if you're trying to speak like this kind of mecha soul, robot-y, techie language for the first time, you're absolutely going to need to refer back to this dictionary or like visual dictionary of all these things, because you won't necessarily know how this stuff looks. So this one here is from like one of my favorite artists, a guy called Clog2, who does all these kind of like mecha soul things, and the amount of detail that he puts into the cables, and it all looks like it should work. It's just like super futuristic. His like mecha soul visual language is like, he's super fluent in that visual language. So he probably wouldn't need the reference as much as somebody like me who doesn't necessarily do this as often as he would. So yeah, it's basically just like increase your visual vocabulary to a point where you can speak it accurately. Otherwise, like you said, like you think you might know what a bike looks like, but you kind of don't. One of the examples that I always use for that is like the looking and seeing kind of thing. Like you can, it's like listening and hearing. Like you can hear somebody speak, but you're not necessarily listening to them. Just like you can look at something, but you don't necessarily see it.
Yeah, my wife accuses me of the listening thing a lot.
Yeah. And we all do it. It's like, you're in class, in history class, and you kind of zone out and you can hear the person, but you're not necessarily listening. I always kind of compare that to like any Sydney-siders, or anybody who's kind of been to Sydney will know this. Like this question of like, you've seen the Opera House many, many times before. How many sails are on it? And nobody can answer accurately how many that is, because you kind of look at it, but you never really sit down and like see it. So if you sat down and drew it, you'd know for sure. Yeah. It's 9, by the way, the answer.
I was going to guess 11. Damn, I knew I always get it the wrong side of the decimal point.
Most people go like 5 or whatever. It's a bit strange. But anyways, without further ado, let's get into the kind of the drawing portion of things. So we've got our reference, we've got our inspiration. Reference, as I said, will come later. We've got some inspiration. What I've done as well, and I'll jump a little bit further ahead, is I'm going to give myself a little bit of a brief, and I'm going to draw my robot based on a little rice cooker.
Cool.
Just because it's like, it might give me a little bit more kind of clarity on what I'm doing. It's a bit of a self brief, if you will.
Okay.
So I always think that's kind of good to do this kind of stuff, to like give yourself a little bit of a guiding rail. Otherwise, open brief can be a little bit daunting. So let's get straight into this. So I'm just, blank canvas. I created a new layer. I've got my brush here, which is just your like super standard round brush. I'm using my Wacom pen, as you can see. So I've got pressure sensitivity, and that will give me opacity and size. So again, it's always that same thing of like light press, thin and light, heavy press, thick and dark. Yeah.
Right.
Which is akin to kind of like a pencil or whatever. So this is always the kind of the brush that I will use for sketching. So I'll just kind of go in normally and do this. This is your kind of classic example of, doing these small sketches. I probably went a little bit big here for what I'm trying to do. So, you can start your sketches by doing these kind of things. And at this point, I'm pretending like I don't know yet that I'm going to do a rice cooker. So I'm purposefully kind of doing things that don't necessarily look like rice cookers. But yeah, just, exploring kind of different ideas, seeing what can happen, not being too fussed about like how stuff looks and how it would work, just making a whole bunch of little kind of robots, maybe kind of picking up on some of that kind of Star Wars reference and kind of seeing how things look, giving it a little bit of a change.
And would you do this part, like this version of the process, would you do this after you've like visually looked at some reference or done some research and then kind of try to do it from memory? Or do you have like that mood board like on a different screen, or are you flicking between the two? Or is this more of a freestyle kind of thing?
That's a great question. And
it's my job.
I think there's an argument for both. For me personally, I tend to try and do this first, and then I can go and look at reference once I feel like, okay, I think I've exhausted what was in my brain.
Yeah.
I need to kind of go and have a look and see like what else is out there, what else can I do? Because the trick is, if you go and kind of do too much of a targeted search, so I've got a bunch of these guys that you guys saw here, where like some of these, are going to be used as reference. Others will be used as inspiration. So like these guys are probably more inspiration and so on. And this is just like me on Pinterest, obviously. But the trick with this kind of stuff is like, if you look at too much stuff, you're going to find a whole bunch of really awesome things, and they're going to be in your brain. And then you're kind of going to be like, there's nothing I can do that's going to be cooler than that.
Yeah.
Like that's always going to be the best thing. And you're maybe going to err on the side of like copying or plagiarism, which is a bit tricky. So I like to kind of do things that sit in my own brain a little bit. And for sure, you'll do this thing where you'll go online after you've done this, and you'll find stuff that's going to be similar to what you've done. I experienced this quite a bit whenever I'm doing like Japanese things, for instance. Because I'm not the only person using kind of like anime style and Japanese things. Hello, my brush is doing some of weird things here. So of course I'm going to have things that are going to look a little bit weird and funky as I go. So, and like it might be quite similar to this thing. I wonder if my thing has crashed here. The joys of live. Folks, I feel
is
like
the pen not touching the canvas?
No, it's gone, but I've got the spinning wheel of death. I might just force quit my Photoshop real quick and come back to this.
Well, while you're doing that, it's quite interesting, like what you were talking about, because that's the same approach that I'll have towards design a lot of the time. Like I might, maybe doing even naming and things like that. You got to be really careful, because you see something and like, one of my favorite names was always Mentally Friendly, the design agency. I just thought that's such a perfect name. The more you think about it, the more I think it's better and things like that. But you can often, if you're just thinking, well, what's a variation of that I can do? You're always going to get this like adjective noun or noun adjective kind of combo going on. Yeah. Whereas the best thing to do, you're going to have something actually quite similar to that. Whereas like I find the best thing to do is to just, you know, sit down and pump out as much as you can. I really like what you said before about kind of exhausting what's in my mind. So you kind of get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm almost at the point where I'm going to start doing more variations of what I've just done now anyway. Okay, cool. I've approached it from an originality standpoint. Now let's go out and do some reference. We'll mix them all together and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that's it. I think my Cintiq has stopped working, which is very bad for this. What to do? This is the worst case scenario that I was hoping wouldn't happen here.
Is this the like hard reset version that we might need to do?
What to do? You know what? I'm going to do this with a mouse and we'll fix this later on.
Wow.
So at this stage, I think I can probably like manage this with a mouse. This is going to be old school and a little bit rough, but in the spirit of what we're doing here, I think it's still going to work. Yeah. Cause otherwise I'd have to restart my computer and like, that might take a few minutes. So let's go old school here. I think I probably just need to update my driver and get it working again. But, let's go in and open up my inspo reference here. There we go.
How often will you use a mouse?
Where we started.
Normally?
Oh, never.
Never.
Like, never, ever. Mostly just because, like, you can't really draw with a mouse accurately. But for what I'm going to kind of show you guys today, I think it might still kind of work in my favor, and it'll be a good exercise for me. So let's do that.
Let's do it. We've got you. We're with you. We're with you, buddy.
Said we were going to do things differently.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So what you can see here that I've kind of done previously is like, as you saw before, I was kind of like doing sketches, just your traditional way and kind of, you know, messing around with other stuff. But I kind of want to do something a little bit different today and like do this, what we call like silhouette sketches, which are just kind of these small little bits and pieces that you can see here, just black and white, very kind of ill-defined, but that's why I think that's what's important about this is it's not super defined. They're quite small. And the not defined thing means that it's going to be like, you're going to be more free to explore things, right? Where you're going to look at this and go, all right, what can I do here? Let me just go nuts and start with something like this. And then I'm going to go like, why not, right? I'm going to do this and that, and then this over here, and that's going to connect. And then these guys are going to be like so. And yeah, that's kind of where I want to live. And then, like, I can't really see a robot right here, so maybe I'll just put like something like this, and then whatever. That's fine. Move on, do a different one. I can kind of try out different variations of this. Let me do a smaller actual A4 here and reduce the res. There we go. New layer. Always make a new layer. And always name that layer. All right, so yeah, just kind of messing around. Let's make a triangle head one, and triangle head has two little legs and a big square screen face with a circle in it, and that's my little triangle face robot, and he's got ears. Done. And this little mistake line here is actually cool. That's going to be an antenna. So this is my little triangle hero. This is something that I would probably never think of doing, like if I was doing this intentionally, if you will. This is kind of like accidental kind of drawing. And it's something that can be super fun and kind of super liberating to do. And you can get some really rad ideas by doing this kind of thing and seeing like, you know, what's going to happen if, you know, this guy, like this is the little kind of classic, like he's got a wheel underneath him and like that's BB-8 standard,
kind of
like
vibes, like
yeah,
a
kind of
unicycle
BB-8
kind of thing. Yeah.
And this again is like, this lives in my brain as a visual language now because I'm a Star Wars fan and I've seen Star Wars and that kind of thing of like this little robot that drives around on a kind of like, unicycle. But yeah, these kind of things are super fun to do and super kind of easy to do and super quick to do. And I think that's the point here, is don't try and kind of make a whole lot of detail here, because the point is it's not detailed and it's not set in stone. And something that you think might be an antenna, when you start drawing it, might turn into like a wing or like an exhaust intake or something, and be super kind of fun to work with. So yeah, it's not necessarily this idea of, speed painting, but it's kind of that. Another thing that you can do if you're kind of stuck is like, because I've made this sheet here of these kind of robots and there's heaps of them, once I've kind of feeling like, what else can I do? I think I've done every possible robot. Like, of course you haven't done every possible robot. Right. There's millions upon millions of variations that you could do. But you can start to kind of, again, give yourself a bit of a brief and maybe have a bit of a challenge and go, what if I started doing robots that like fit in the empty negative space here? So I'm going to let the negative space in between these drawings define the shape of this next robot. So I'm going to start like here, and that guy's going to have something over there, and that's going to go dent in there. And then like maybe that's going to be like an exhaust, and he's going to come over here and he's going to have two little things. And then over here, obviously I don't have much, so I can start going a little bit more kind of free. And again, it's just another way to do things that you might not necessarily normally think of if you were kind of doing like, I'm drawing robots, and you start with a human frame or you start with something like that, and it's like, well, yeah, that's cool, and you've got lots of interesting things here, but something like this is always going to be a little bit more unexpected and kind of, I don't want to say necessarily more interesting, but definitely more unexpected and more kind of like more ideas. And so, yeah, again, this just looks like a scribble. So maybe I'll come in with a little bit more definition here and start kind of adding in, more kind of mechanically looking things. And again, obviously this is going to be like a lot more kind of defined as we go later on, but just kind of showing you guys different ways of approaching this to get these kind of like quite original shapes and robots that aren't going to be something that you've seen a million times before, or that you've kind of done when you've seen kind of your research or your kind of reference, your visual reference kind of search. And it's going to be a little bit more kind of surprising. So we can do that. And then one of my personal favorites as well is we can start to do things with like the lasso tool. And this is where it gets a little bit kind of crazy, where we start to just do these crazy selections and kind of come what may kind of thing. So that's my kind of thing here, and I'm going to fill that. My shortcut, by the way, for filling is Option Delete, and that fills with my foreground color. Always make sure that you press Option and Delete at the same time. Otherwise, you just hit Delete and you're just going to delete stuff. And
have a bad time.
Yeah. I mean,
it's really cool. It's like
robot. Know about a happy accident, but yeah. And we can start to add to this, but again, at this stage it probably defeats the purpose of like, oh, cool, and then you actually start drawing the thing, and that's probably not where you want to be at this stage. You still want to just be going like, what happens if I just go absolutely bananas and have something like this? What goes on here? All right, cool. I'm kind of almost seeing these like fin shapes, like this is like a seal or like a whale fin. So maybe this next robot will be like some aquatic robot. And that's not something, again, that I would have thought of, right? Like I'm looking at all this reference for Star Wars and finding all these like space robots and wheels and things. What if he was like semi-organic? That's cool. That's a nice idea. Like I can try and kind of mess around with that and see where that lands me. And so doing this it can be like super liberating.
It's really cool.
And super fun to do because you get all these like different kind of ideas that you wouldn't necessarily think of.
This reminds me, sorry to interrupt, but it does remind me quite a lot. Like I think you've seen like the artist recreates like a kid's drawings. Have you seen that sort of stuff like on the internet before? So they take like a kid's like squiggle drawing or something, and then you're creating this like artwork out of it. Johanna in chat has said, "Mr. Squiggle, is that you?" Always love that
Well,
show.
it's a bit like that, right? Like it's, you look at this and you go like, what do you see? But obviously, like, because robots are in my brain, because that's what I'm doing with this particular brief, I'm going to look at it in the sense of a robot. Like, but yeah, it's the similar kind of principle to Mr. Squiggle, in that it's just like, do a thing, land on the page, and just then you look at it and go like, what's going on here? How do I kind of manage this? You can also mess around with this and see, like, sometimes I've seen, I started following this guy, and I won't remember his name because I'm terrible with names, who does this same kind of thing, but with more like straight edge kind of shapes. And then goes in with the liquify tool, which is up here.
Always got to give liquify a couple of minutes to fire up.
Yeah, always. And then I use this like warp tool. It's basically kind of like a push smudge tool, and he starts to kind of do these things, right? He starts with these kind of like organic, like not organic shape, very mechanical, like straight edge shapes, and then he kind of just tweaks them like this and gets these really cool results. And even then, just like right here, there's potentially something that's going to be really cool that I can kind of see as a robot in my brain. So all these different ways of kind of starting this, if you don't necessarily know what you're going for. So again, if my brief to myself was like, let me do kind of like, an R2D2 version 2 or whatever. So it needs to look like that. So this is going to be inspiration and reference, because I'm going to need to look at like, what is it that makes R2 R2? It's definitely the blue and the white. So that'll need to stick. These little vents on there, the little lens, this other little lens, the lights, like all these things are super like Canon, Star Wars. They're very R2. So I'm going to need those things to be in there. So that's going to be used as reference. But then, yeah, like I'm not doing that at this stage. I'm going to do the rice cooker thing. But again, it just depends on what you're kind of trying to do for yourself as a brief. I might delete these guys. Sorry,
I love
Triangle
it.
Bot.
There's like three different approaches to like just getting started, which is great because hey, that happens to be the title of the show. Particularly if you're blank, like what's a different approach? And yeah, definitely techniques that I've never seen here before. I really love the approach of, okay, cool, we've done all this, we've done a whole page. All right, now let's use the negative space like on top of that, and you can kind of keep mashing it up that way, and just get some like interesting shapes, some interesting kind of geometry happening there. And the cool thing is that it's coming from an original source. Like you didn't even really intend any of it, which is great. So you know it's 100% original because it wasn't even intentional. So, and then grabbing those elements, I'm sure, and then bringing them into the artwork maybe a bit later, picking and choosing bits. Like there might be something there and you're like, actually that would make a really cool belt buckle, and then you shrink it down and then make it look nice and everything, and you get that interesting pattern there. Very, very cool approach. I really like it.
And again, it's super fun, like just to switch things up a little bit.
Yeah. Someone looks over your shoulder and what are you doing? I'm working.
This is my job. Go away. Right. So we're going to now switch to this rice cooker. Right. So we've got all these things that we kind of done. We're going to look at this rice cooker. I quite like this one, this little model. I can see that this one has this like little like antenna ear thing that's very kind of, like Overwatch kind of cyberpunky kind of vibe. It's obviously not part of it. That's just a spoon that kind of sits in the side.
I was going to say that's a spoon,
dude. Kind of like antenna. Yeah. But again, like, if I was doing this in my like silhouette thing, I wouldn't identify that as a thing. It's just a shape that sticks out. What could it become? Same thing with this little handle that goes behind us. Like, that could easily turn into headphones that are just kind of like put at an angle behind it. Like, why would a robot have headphones? Like, hey, why not?
Why wouldn't a robot have headphones?
Got to listen to music too. Yeah. So I'm going to start using this. And obviously, like this one, some of these are like Japanese rice cookers. So they're going to make them kind of cute and like faces and stuff on purpose. So this one's kind of cool because he's already got a weird little face, and he's pink and he's kind of like tubby and short and stuff. So that could be kind of cute. But I feel like I want to do something like this, like a little floaty kind of dude. And if I'm going really ham, then I can start to think about like how the rice cooker works, and start to think about, things like, is there kind of like a lid that happens with here, and like you open it up and then like a little person goes inside to pilot the droid, and maybe then it becomes a spaceship, or who knows. Like let's keep this like open, but my brief to myself is like make a robot from a rice cooker. Done. All right, so we're going to start kind of messing around with this and look maybe at some of the robots that we kind of accidentally made, and see if there's any that kind of are a little bit more kind of rice cooker than others. So I kind of like this one. Hello.
Okay, and while we're jumping over into there, we're just a little bit over halfway. If anybody has any questions while we're going through this, don't be afraid to throw them in chat. I'd be interested if anyone else has any like ideas of like how to get started, like when you're a little bit blank, if there's anything else, because I love these ones that Jeremy's shown. Do you have any that that you think are really cool or help you kind of generate ideas or like shapes, ideas for references and things like that? Let us know.
Yep. So I like that one. So I've just made a selection of that one and grabbed a new layer from it. So I'll show you guys how I do that. Once again, I'll grab this one here. So let's make a selection. Here we go. Bang. Make sure that I'm on my sketches layer here, and then Command or Control J, and then that will duplicate the layer. It doesn't look like anything's happened, but now you can see I've got these two robots. So I'm digging those two. And what else have I got? I kind of like this guy up here, even though, again, he's super undefined and super unpolished. But that just means he's more kind of open to possibilities.
Yeah.
It's the infinity stones, right? It's just like, this is your new reality. It could be anything. So I've just copied those and I'm going to paste them in to here. Nope, that's the wrong one. Copy, copy, copy. Please, please, please. And then paste. Yes.
Hooray.
Good. That's what I wanted. So let's resize these guys a little bit to fit in my page. So I got these three robots. They're all kind of similar shapes, but again, I probably want that because I'm looking at a rice cooker. So they're going to need to kind of fit that sort of like short, stocky kind of ball model that we're doing. And I might smash these three together now and drop their opacity. So now I've got this as a kind of like a reference layer. I can start to make a new layer on top of it, and I can start to draw. So tests of skill here, using a mouse to do these sketches. This is where, again, like what I've done so far could potentially be done with a mouse because I'm not too worried about being, clean and kind of drawing. I'm just making kind of vague shapes, which is the whole point. But now is when I would really like my Wacom to be working. But we'll see what happens. So let me jump back to my reference here and kind of look at like what goes on. So we've got buttons on the front. That's easy. Like if we want eyes, that's very easy. This thing can be a screen. We've got heaps of different kind of possibilities here that can happen. So let's start to maybe kind of throw in some different ideas here. So we talked about headphones. So let's go in and do just that. So we're going to start by making some headphones. That brush is way too big. What is going on with my Photoshop is also on the fritz, apparently.
Maybe it's Photoshop. Maybe save and restart. If Photoshop's also behaving a bit funky.
Yeah. This is weird. Okay. Again, the joys of live.
Just always the way with live streaming. If you really want it to work,
extra special.
Won't work when it's live. I was asking, we were chatting about like different approaches. Johanna said, thinking back on Jeff Chen, using photos of everyday items is always a fun art block breaker. That's right. And actually thinking about Jeff Chen as well, he did introduce me to kit bashing, which I'd never seen before. But yeah, kit bashing in illustration. I think he had like 3 or 4 like just elements from a different piece of artwork that he did, but you could use, you could probably use anything. and created, a whole new complete artwork out of it. So it's always really interesting, like thinking of different approaches to creating artwork, other than, the kind of the usual way, or the way that we're used to, especially as like a way to kind of break, I don't know, the monotony of it, or if you're like have a creative block or something, having these like different tools and different approaches to creating your artwork could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've seen people do this before as well in the spirit of kit bashing, where they'll take two artworks that they've done before, cut them, flip them upside down, overlay them on top, and then basically do the same thing. It's like, what shapes appear here? And that can start a new artwork. So we're good. We're back now. So let's start and put in some headphones on here. And again, I'm trying to kind of like stick to, like, maybe they're headphones, maybe they're not. We don't know yet, but that's going to be my little handle from my little kind of rice cooker here, this dude. So he's got a little kind of handle coming out over there. And sometimes I'll do this if I'm obviously like using a lot of these as reference. I'll just drag them and stick them in my Photoshop thing here, and stick them in actually my image, just so that I've got them there, so I don't have to flip back to that image somewhere else. And I've got them on hand if I'm going to be kind of using these two, and then smack these two and call that reference or refs, whichever one kind of suits you better. And call this one sketch defined. So now we're just kind of having a look and seeing, all right, cool, let's see about kind of doing this kind of capsule thing here. And then we've got this little kind of bit that sticks out right here, which is probably some like little clippy thing. So we're going to kind of use that a little bit and see what happens. Again, this is like this, this visual language idea that I've spoken about before, which is things that kind of like, if you're going to draw like a box like this, like a platform and two plates coming together, doing this is cool. Doing this is cooler, because those two things are now like linked together like a kind of a puzzle piece, if you know what I mean. So those two things, like you can imagine that they're like closed together. It's less boring than just a line in the middle. So that's always going to be kind of a nice thing to do. And then if you want to, you can even kind of go further than that and put like a little thing here. So you could imagine that like this is like your kind of like your clip things that you press on a thing and then it unclips like a belt or whatever, and then they see things come apart. So one of the interesting things about all this kind of like, techie Mechasol things is obviously trying to think about how this would actually work, right? So for instance, if I was doing the same thing and trying to think about like, oh, there's this kind of lid shape here that kind of follows around. How does this thing open? Where does it open from? There needs to be some kind of like hinge or something here where it can kind of like, like a pin, and then it can rotate around that. So I need to draw that in, and then that needs to be attached to one bit and to the next bit. And then that can kind of start to be this thing that's like, you can imagine how that hinges. And then it also needs like a little kind of like steam powered piston or something that's going to power that. So trying to think of how this thing would actually work is going to be one of the driving things for you to put stuff in and make this robot look like it actually functions.
Yeah, and is this where like reference will come in like quite handy? You might like want to, have a look what gears will be next to what things, or is there like a motherboard in there, or where might the lights go? Or you're talking about exhausts before as well. I love the idea of like little mini hydraulics and stuff like that. This is super cool. And hey, if you're just joining us, we're here with Jeremy Lord, and talking about kind of taking inspiration and from different things, and like especially in like kind of from a techie kind of perspective. But if you have any questions, throw them in chat while we're here.
So yes, you can see like with some of these references here, like, right, so we've got these three kind of like eyes here that kind of look at a thing, and then we've got these pipes. We don't know what the tubes do, but they obviously power or feed something into that, and it's glowing red, and it's just like assembled bits. Same thing here, right? If I zoom in on this base up here, that's obviously like a mount that like screws into a ceiling. There needs to be something that looks like kind of bolts and screws to make it look like it's fastened in there and secured into this thing. So it all looks like it kind of works and kind of fits into this kind of idea. So it is definitely where like reference will come in handy and how you can kind of work this in. But I also want to not kind of stray too much from my cool, fun little thing that I did by accident and try and kind of normalize it too much. Like if I start to get rid of it and make it too kind of rice cookery, then I've kind of lost the point of doing what I was doing previously, which is like making all these crazy sketches. Like I need to try and figure out like, what are these things? You know what? I feel like they could just be like sphere wheels, like little kind of like balls that are also wheels that kind of fit into these sockets, so that this thing is like a multi-directional kind of wheel thing. It can like wheel sideways, just like, you know, like futuristic kind of thing. I think there's a few like space, like, you know, like Mars rovers or whatever that have these things that are just this, like, it's just a ball bearing in the hinge and it can just kind
it's
of
almost
go
like an external
wants.
coaster or something.
Yeah, like a, and you know what, like it can be a kind of a good reference to look at here, and I might not do that right now because it might kind of take a little bit too long, but you know, like the little like roll-on deodorant thing with the little ball in it, like, it's basically that. It's
totally.
Basically kind of doing the same thing. So if you were stuck on something like that, you might kind of look at that and go like, all right, how does that work? Like the ball needs to fit inside of another thing. And again, like asking yourself, how does this thing actually work? So that people can get that reference and look at the thing and go like, oh, it's a wheel. I get it. It's actually kind of fun to do this with a mouse. I don't see myself doing this always with a mouse. I think I like my work on too much to abandon it. But yeah, this is more interesting than I thought it would be. And let's go and turn this like into maybe little kind of like rabbit ears kind of things. And so again, this is where like my inspiration side of things, so this is all my reference, but my inspo over here, I've got a range of kind of different vibes, right? Like this one's a little bit more kind of like 8-bit basic, kind of Minecrafty, just blocky, simple. This one's all just kind of like a little camera spider bot, but I quite like this kind of thing where it's a little bit retro. We've got this kind of like first generation, like multimedia Mac kind of thing. But the fact that it's got these little stickers on it, it's got a bit of personality. I feel like that's the way that I'm going to go with this, because that's my style as well. Like I quite like the kind of like Akira cyberpunky kind of something with a little bit more personality. And maybe, you know, it's got like stickers stuck on it that are not necessarily all functional. So I kind of want to like hold on to that and maybe, you know, like give him quite a cute like anime cat ears or something. And like, why, more kind of to the point is like, well, why not? So we got that, and he's got headphones on and he's kind of looking fun, and that's cool. And then he can have these little kind of antenna on here, and we don't know what these antennas are and what signal they're kind of throwing out, but it's kind of fun.
I like it. I'm trying to think about what like
from this like rice cooker,
what like the robot rice cooker would be listening to.
He's catching signals to let him know when he should start making the rice. And then we've got all these dials and buttons on here. So maybe like this guy's got a little screen on there. And the screen, like this is something that I loved. I don't know if anybody's kind of seen WALL-E, the Pixar one, which I found that amazing. Like the fact that there's literally the lines of dialogues for the robot consists of one word each. Right? He says WALL-E, she says Eva, and yet they're having these like intricate conversations, and you know exactly what they're saying. It's like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
But I quite like this idea that everybody's ripped since Pixar did this, where it's a screen and the emotions are little faces, like little 8-bit faces that like a smile or a blink or a wink or whatever. And it's like, that's cool. That's so cool. Whereas the WALL-E one is a lot more analog, like little camera lenses and like no mouth, but I quite like this idea. So I might kind of stick in something like that in here. And and kind of just give it a little bit of that kind of anime vibe with, you know, kind of like these 8-bit eyes. So I'm doing these kind of scan lines in here to kind of get that screen vibe. So that's one of my eyes, and that can be the other one. There we go. Again, still pretty rough. And then maybe you can have a little mouth. Yay, super cute. And then, yeah, then it becomes like, all right, what else goes on here? Maybe it's a little bit plain. Maybe I'm happy with it like this. Maybe this thing is a big kind of like dome of kind of like glass, and we're going to see through it. I'm not going to attempt to draw an entire cockpit with a mouse. So that's not going to happen today. That might probably happen on Thursday. But we can start to kind of, you know, picture like, does this guy have like a little reflection over here? And so we can kind of see that that's like this kind of like blackened glass kind of shiny thing. And then again, my reference here of these little kind of bits and pieces and these like joins that happen on this kind of stuff. And if I hop back into my kind of mood board here, I can see these kind of things, right? So we've got these like vent holes here because obviously there's machinery inside, so it's going to get hot. So we need stuff to like vent out that kind of stuff. This is all stuff that we've seen before on like machines that we have and know. So it's all visual language that we can understand what these things are. So yeah, so things like that, like this is cool, right? So we've got all these plaques and like something turns here. I don't know what it is, but there's pipes and there's like handles and things like that. It's like, cool. I don't know what this thing does, but it looks like it does a thing that like that kind of works. Same thing with these things, right? Like these are all doors and like hatches. So they all have a little hinge and a little handle. And it's like, all right, cool. I can see that's a door. So let's kind of mess around with that on this little guy. And kind of look at kind of like what happens here. What can we do that's going to make this guy a little bit more interesting? So maybe so that sound can come out and he can make sounds. Maybe he's got a little vent thing here, like 3 little lines here. That's going to be for sound to come out where the mouth would go.
Yes.
That can be super fun to do.
Headphones, antenna, and a microphone, which I really like it. So we're going down this like audio kind of theme. This is where I'd start Googling like Lucio from Overwatch and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. And I've got this little guy over here. So it's like, is that an arm? Does he have another extra arm over here? In which case, obviously, I'm going to have to do that to here. And it starts to become a little bit kind of kooky and crazy. But again, like, why not? That's the brief, right? Like, do something a little bit different. And give him this like weird little dinky arm. We don't know what it does, but we don't really need to know what it does. Let's give him a few more kind of dials and buttons on the side here. And kind of see how we go with that. Then we can start to see, all right, cool, let's bring in some kind of, whoops, again, using a mouse here.
I think there was a question or two before about what do you usually use, because you are using a mouse at the moment. I've had a bunch of people jump through.
I usually use my Wacom and my tablet, which is why you're looking at me doing this rather than this. But unfortunately, I think my Wacom needs an update, which I didn't do because who thinks about doing updates unless you're prompted to? So
sometimes it can be the opposite.
Everything's for it's a little bit.
Everything's working perfectly. And you're like, hey, I'll just update everything before this like stream or presentation, and then nothing works. And you're like, oh no. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. But I think you're doing a stellar job with
thank you
with the mouse. Very cool. But yeah, if you're out there in your market, like,
but yeah, normally I use a Wacom for sure.
Yeah, and just because this is like kind of an introduction-y kind of session, if you are new, we've done sessions before with Jeremy and other artists. Like, you know, back in the day, Wacoms were like quite, you know, it was quite a chicken and egg situation. You kind of wanted to be, you know, professional before you really start investing in the tech and stuff. But now there's lots of cheap options out there and good entry-level things to try it out. But, you know, I'm sure, speaking for Jeremy and other artists that have come on Adobe Live, that once you like getting the Wacom is very important for the process, for the speed, for the like pressure sensitivity and things like that. And you know, doesn't mean you have to have one, but it's a very solid investment if illustration is the way that you want to go.
Totally. And you know, like with programs like Illustrator, for instance, this is what I was talking about before, where like I quite like Photoshop because it feels more drawing. Whereas when I'm in Illustrator, depending on what you're doing, obviously, like if you're doing like what Dale does or what Alex Lewis does, where like you're actually kind of doing more kind of drawing things, Dale the Genie, then yeah, a Wacom is going to be super important to have. But if you're using the pen tool and you're doing more kind of like vector-based things and basic shapes and graphic design, then you might not necessarily need one. So, but absolutely, like I'm not necessarily sponsored by Wacom, but I can't recommend one enough. If you're kind of looking at doing digital illustration and kind of like drawing digitally, then yeah, Wacom is just going to change your life for sure. And by the way, I keep saying Wacom, but it is actually Wacom.
Wacom. Yep. I was corrected
so
by
moved on
people
to the
from
other robot,
Wacom the first time that I learned that.
Yep. So I moved on to the second one here just to kind of keep the stream going a little bit and like not do too much of this one. We can kind of choose this one, which one we're going to do next week and kind of see how we go. But I quite liked this one here that has this like long visor kind of separation here. And he also has an antenna kind of thing. Don't know how that's going to attach onto here, but I don't really need to know that right now. And then he's got these two kind of like...
This reminds me of
I watched
something. Fallout. Reminds me of those Fallout. Do you play much Fallout? The flying, flying little bots?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, totally. And again, like if that was now like the thing of like, okay, you've said that, and I'm like, that's cool, maybe I want to do that. Then obviously I'm going to go look at like old 1960s radios and like obviously footage from like Fallout and that kind of stuff, and like try and get that kind of like retro look that people can kind of identify with. So yeah, this can be quite kind of fun and cool. And I've got this guy again, so I need to hold true to what I said and see what happens. And maybe he's got like one big kind of antenna happening up here, and maybe that's not an antenna, maybe that's like a wing or something, so he can fly more accurately, and it kind of helps him kind of get guided. But yeah, I quite like him too. Feels a little bit more serious, a little bit less kind of friendly and kind of Kirby than this one.
Yeah. So why is that? Is that kind of because of the face? Like we're interpreting this inanimate object or this thing you've drawn like as like a face, and because it goes down, it looks like he's kind of, you know. Well,
here's the thing, right? Cranky. So if I did this guy with this emotion instead.
Oh, okay.
He's still kind of cute.
Like, that's a bad guy.
He's angry, but he's still, I mean, he's not super threatening, right? Because I'm been cute. This guy's a little bit more kind of like serious.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I could potentially change, but it's nice to have a few kind of different options here. And, you know, I'll come in with like a little bit more flavor when I bring in color and details and special effects. And that might make him a little bit more kind of like along these lines of kind of anime. And if I feel like this one's a little bit too kind of cute and round and fluffy, then I might kind of try and see if I can add in, you know, maybe he's got like two like rotating guns that then makes him a little bit more kind of serious and a little bit less kind of like, don't mess with me, right?
Right.
And they kind of sit over here. So there's heaps of stuff that he's still kind of cute.
He's very cute. You're right. I was wrong. He's like having a little tantrum, like he's kind of, or he's determined or something. Yeah. Like, I do get that. But hey, we're gonna have to leave the stream there. We are going to be back in 48 hours, so it'll be Thursday here in Australia. If you're watching in the US, it'll be Wednesday evening. So please come and join us. We will. Yeah, we're going to continue on from here. I see some questions jumping in the chat. I'm sorry, we have run out of time, but we'll cover those, answer some of those questions next time we're back on Adobe Live with Jeremy Lord. Jeremy, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
A full working gear. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been super fun. I'm looking forward to Thursday as well.
All right. Well, great. I'll see you then. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on Thursday. Have a wonderful day or evening. Bye.
Thanks.